thought I heard something out here. It's just the Master Sword. Could that sound have been coming from it?
Greetings, Master Belmont. My calculations tell me there is a 93.8421% chance that there is a topic of discussion on your mind.
Oh, Fi. Hey there. I didn't realize you were awake, or paying attention to my thirst for Zelda lore. I'm always up for talking, though. Also, maybe you just call me Cornelius or Pixel?
Master Pixel, which topic is on your mind that I might be able to help you with?
Oh boy, one-on-one with the Master Sword. Where do I start? The Zonai? Low Rules Triforce? The Interlopers? Maybe not Tingle. Just so many good topics. Fi, how knowledgeable are you about all these things? I mean, don't you just hang out in a sword in the middle of the Lost Woods? It doesn't seem like you would be the most up-to-date on topics, even if you are besties with Rauru.
Master Pixel, I am connected to the Shikar Hyrule network, and am very knowledgeable about the history of these lands. Is there a topic you wish to discuss today?
The Shika Hyrule network? Is that like the Hyrule internet? Oh, whatever. Let's just get into the action. I know what to bring up, one of my favorite topics. But before we get into that, perhaps we should do an opening for this new segment?
Understood. And what name do you wish to designate for this segment of your channel?
How about Zelda AI? It gets the point across. With that said and done, let's start the new opening. I'm Cornelius Belmont.
And my designation is Fi, the spirit of the Master Sword.
And this is Zelda AI. Hey guys, thanks for watching the show. If you like what I do, please give this video a like and subscribe. Make sure to click the bell notification so you don't miss an episode. Zelda AI was made in part by using ChatGPT. Thanks to these people for letting me use their assets. Spoilers ahead for the following games. Now, let's begin. Alright Fi, here's a big question for you. One that has been bugging me for about 20 years. The Great Flood in The Wind Waker raised the sea level to the point where only mountaintops remained above the waves. Wouldn't this have killed the majority of life on the planet?
It is certainly possible that the Great Flood in The Wind Waker could have had a catastrophic impact on the planet's ecosystem, potentially leading to the extinction of many species. However, it is also worth noting that the Zelda universe is one in which magic and supernatural forces play a significant role. In The Wind Waker, it is revealed that the gods flooded the world to seal away Ganondorf, who had threatened to conquer Hyrule. It is possible that the gods may have used their powers to mitigate the impact of the flood on the planet's ecosystem, or that they may have taken steps to preserve certain species in order to maintain the balance of the world. It is also worth noting that The Wind Waker takes place in a somewhat stylized and whimsical universe, with a more cartoonish art style than other entries in the series. As such, it is possible that the game's creators may not have intended for the implications of the flood to be taken too literally or realistically. In conclusion, while the Great Flood in The Wind Waker could have had devastating effects on the planet's ecosystem, it is possible that magical or supernatural forces may have mitigated the impact of the flood, or that the game's creators did not intend for the implications of the flood to be taken too literally.
Just because the game has a cartoon art style and whimsical elements, doesn't mean that the creators weren't thinking about the implications of their writing. In fact, if we look at the prologue, it talks about massive death and destruction. Furthermore, Hyrule is just one small part of the world. If ocean levels rose, it would only make sense that much life would be drowned beneath the waves.
You are correct that just because a game has a cartoon art style and whimsical elements does not mean that the creators were not thinking about the implications of their writing. The prologue of The Wind Waker does indeed mention massive death and destruction, suggesting that the flood had a significant impact on the world. In terms of the impact of the flood on the world's ecosystem, it is certainly possible that many species would have been drowned or forced to adapt to new environments. It is also worth noting that, in the Zelda universe, there are many species that possess unique abilities and characteristics that may allow them to survive in harsh or unusual environments. However, it is also worth considering the role of magic and supernatural forces in the Zelda universe. The gods of the Zelda universe are often depicted as having the power to shape the world and its destiny, and it is possible that they may have intervened in order to mitigate the impact of the flood on the world's ecosystem. In conclusion, while the Great Flood in the Wind Waker could have had devastating effects on the world's ecosystem, it is also possible that magical or supernatural forces may have played a role in mitigating the impact of the flood.
The problem is that, while it is true that the all-powerful goddesses had the means to, say, protect the civilizations of the lands outside of Hyrule, they quite simply chose to ignore the many citizens of those kingdoms. It's also entirely possible that they didn't consider Hyrule itself, or really anything else about the world in need of saving. If things were so bad that they needed to intervene, would the Triforce split apart into pieces, and power in the hands of a man who was trying to claim the other two? Was it really necessary for them to engage in such a widespread, blunt approach to end the conflict?
The precise details of how the world was affected by the flood may be left somewhat open to interpretation. You raise a valid point that the Golden Goddesses may not have prioritized the survival of individual kingdoms or civilizations over their own goals and desires. It is also possible that they did not consider the impact of the flood on Hyrule and the rest of the world's ecosystem. In terms of the gods' decision to flood the world, it is certainly possible that they chose this method as a way to end the conflict quickly and decisively. As you noted, with the Triforce split and Ganondorf attempting to claim the other two pieces, the situation in Hyrule may have been especially dire. The flood may have been seen as a necessary sacrifice in order to prevent Ganondorf from obtaining the full Triforce and plunging the world into darkness. Ultimately, the reasons behind the gods' decision to flood the world and the impact of that flood on the world's ecosystem may be open to interpretation. The Wind Waker is a complex and multifaceted game that explores themes of sacrifice, redemption, and the cyclical nature of history, and the impact of the flood on the world's ecosystem is just one aspect of this larger narrative.
Sure, the flood is just one aspect, but it is the aspect that I am most focused on here. Ganondorf was very close to seizing the Triforce and using its divine power to not only conquer the kingdom, but potentially remake the world as he saw fit. If the Golden Goddesses chose to flood the world that they created, wouldn't they be willingly engaging in many acts of genocide in the process?
Yes, the decision to flood the world could certainly be seen as an act of genocide, depending on how one interprets the events of the Wind Waker. By flooding the world, the goddesses may have intentionally or unintentionally caused the deaths of many living beings, including innocent people and creatures who had nothing to do with the conflict between Ganondorf and the rest of the world. However, it is also worth considering the larger context of the Zelda universe and the mythology surrounding the Golden Goddesses. The goddesses are often depicted as being above mortal concerns and focused on larger cosmic forces, such as the balance of power between the Triforce pieces. It is possible that, from their perspective, the sacrifice of a few lives was worth it in order to prevent Ganondorf from obtaining the full Triforce and causing even greater destruction. Ultimately, the morality of the goddesses' decision to flood the world is a complex and multifaceted issue, and different players and fans may interpret the events of the Wind Waker in different ways. However, it is clear that the flood had a profound impact on the world and its inhabitants, and that the consequences of the goddesses' actions will continue to be felt throughout the Zelda universe.
Well, the Zelda universe in the adult timeline, that is. Let's bring up one more thing at the end of the game. When the King of Hyrule touches the Triforce, he has the means of undoing and restoring all the things brought about by the flood. He could have restored the kingdom, the people, and the many countless lives around the world. By not doing so, Isn't he guilty of abandoning the world just like the Golden Goddesses did?
That's an interesting point. It's true that at the end of The Wind Waker, the King of Hyrule has the opportunity to use the Triforce to restore the world to its former state, but chooses not to do so. It's unclear exactly why he makes this decision, as the game doesn't provide a clear explanation. One possible interpretation is that the King of Hyrule believes that the flood was a necessary sacrifice in order to prevent Ganondorf from obtaining the full Triforce, and that restoring the world would risk undoing that sacrifice and allowing Ganondorf to return. Alternatively, the king may have simply felt that restoring the world would be too difficult or risky, and chose to leave things as they were. Regardless of the reason, it's certainly possible to see the king's decision not to restore the world as a form of abandonment or neglect. By leaving the world in its flooded state, he is essentially leaving countless lives and ecosystems to suffer the consequences of the flood, and failing to take responsibility for the impact of the goddess's actions. Ultimately, the morality of the king's decision is open to interpretation, and players and fans may have different opinions on whether he was justified in leaving the world in its flooded state.
Well, if you ask me, he gave up on fixing the world. I imagine he believed in his gods, and believed that if this is the choice they made, that he wasn't willing to undo it. The game does show that the world had effectively moved on from the disaster. But it is still hard to accept that letting all that tragedy remain was the right thing to do.
That's a valid interpretation as well. It's possible that the king felt that the flood was an act of divine will, and that undoing it would be a form of blasphemy or disrespect towards the goddesses. It's also true that, despite the devastation caused by the flood, life does seem to have found a way to adapt and continue in the world of The Wind Waker, which may have made the decision to restore the world less pressing or urgent. Ultimately, the decision not to restore the world is a complex and morally ambiguous one, and there may not be a clear answer as to whether it was the right or wrong choice. However, it's certainly an interesting topic for discussion and interpretation among fans of the Zelda series.
I think that will be all for today. Thank you, Fi, for the conversation. I'm gonna go work on the next Let's Talk About episode. I'm looking forward to talking about the new Zonai lore.
It was a pleasure talking with you, and I'm always here if you have more questions or want to chat about other topics. Do you disagree with my assessment of the Great Flood? Is Master Pixel correct in his assumptions that the Golden Goddesses could have solved the conflict without resorting to a global catastrophe? Leave a message in the comments, and there is a 99.684% chance Master Pixel will respond to you. Did you know that Master Pixel has a Patreon? He puts extraordinary effort into this channel and is trying to reach 1,000 subscribers. If you wish to support his endeavors, pledging to his Patreon would increase his happiness by 64.2913%. You would also gain access to his Discord server where you could talk with him directly about his upcoming episodes. I have left a link in the description. Farewell, I look forward to future conversations.